I was also, as you were talking, thinking about the people's pleaser, because as a infectious disease physician, and we have a training program for fellows who are specializing in infectious diseases, and I had a conversation about people pleasing with a fellow last week, and who is a very nice fellow, bless him, but he wants to please everybody and doesn't want to have a conversation when it's a crucial conversation with other people in the team or out of the team. And we had a conversation about you can't always be a people pleaser. You also have to have those conversations, difficult as they may be. They are really important. So really, thank you so much for sharing that. And we can really see how something which was a struggle actually has led you to better things. And you now have an understanding of it. And I think your psychology background has also helped, because I can see how deeply you've analyzed that.
Well, it's interesting, and also, being an immigrant child, I think, there's this interesting thing where you feel like you're stuck between these two worlds, right? You're stuck between this collectivist Eastern, mindset. For us, it was a Sri Lankan, subcontinental mindset, and then we have this, Western mindset, this very individualistic, mindset. So it's a bit like being Batman and Bruce Wayne. During the day, you've got to be this Western-minded, individualistic, talk about your achievements, go out there and be confident. And then when you're home, no one wants to hear about how great you are, because the collective is much more important than the individualistic.
Absolutely.
And so I found, I originally thought that was a curse. I thought it was something that was actually very unhelpful for me. But what I've grown to understand and appreciate is that I get to understand now both worlds. I get to appreciate where people are coming from, where they are torn, perhaps where there are certain pressures, stresses that are impacting them. And that you get to switch, right? You don't have to stay in one mode of operating, right? I think the flexibility, the cognitive flexibility that we can have is super important. And we don't necessarily lean into that. And I think that was an interesting thing. Again, through the struggle came the growth, right? I think, which is interesting.
Absolutely. Perhaps the people pleasing aspect is the reason why we're both on this podcast now. Also, trying to help people, but it's actually it's a good thing in my philosophy, and I'm sure we're similar in that aspect. The more you give, the more you get, and so if you give openly without any strings attached, the best comes back to you. And so my experience of it is pleasing people. Actually, it's nice. You feel better, and more comes back.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes, we get stuck on the people pleasing part, but actually, what if we looked at situation pleasing as well, right? So sometimes we may think that we're trying to be nice to this person, but we need to be nice to the situation. And, I'm sure there are situations where you've had to deliver pretty uncomfortable news, right, to people.
Mm-hmm.
And you may look at it objectively and say, well, I'm not going to please any person here with this news, but the situation requires this of me. And this is what I need to do in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes just having that ability to distance yourself from in the context, from that situation, allows you to do some amazing things.
Fascinating. Again, fascinating conversation. I'm going to ask everybody listening, I hope, and I know you're getting a lot out of it. Subscribe, follow, share the podcast, and just as an advert of something coming, we're also working on an online course, and the online course details will be available very soon. And again, it's the same mission: get as many people to learn the skill of turning struggles to success. So look out for that. Gaj, we're listening very attentively, and I thought you said you had more struggles. So it's we're listening.
You're going to get bored of my struggles by the end of this, Emmanuel, but
not at all.
I'm trying to think of one that might be interesting. Was also setting up the business. Right. And, that happened in 2013 here. We'd moved to Dubai as a family, as a young family in 2008, just before the financial crisis, a few
Wow.
months before the financial crisis hit. And uh, came into an organization that I thought was really sound and secure. And I brought my 2-year-old daughter at the time, just about to turn 2, and my wife. And within the first week, I came home from that first week, and I said to my wife, "I think I've made the biggest mistake of my life, and I think
Mm.
I've dragged you guys into this." Um, the owners of that business were very difficult to work with, very toxic environment that was created there, and we went from, over that course of the year, and the financial crisis obviously was hitting during that time. Went from 25 people to 7 people, right, in the organization. So it was a very boutique consultancy. We moved into 7 people. But out of that came relationships that have stood the test of time. Other peers that I met on that journey. One of them became one of the partners of Compass. And so we built a very
Fascinating.
strong relationship. Through crisis, through hardship, you start to really see the true nature of people, right, coming through. And it's a bit like in psychology when we talk about personality. When there is stress, you tend to revert to your natural style, right? So if you're naturally a very detail-oriented person, during stress, you go even further into the detail. Now, that's a problem and a curse, right? Because sometimes you might need to step away and look at the bigger picture during stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're naturally drawn to the detail, and so, we found that there's interesting things were happening in the relationships between people. And so through that process, I separated from that organization after about a year and then joined another consultancy business. Learned a lot, had some wonderful mentors. And it was one of the mentors who was one of the owners of that business who said to me, "Gaj, you need to leave and set up your own company. I don't know what you're doing working for somebody else." And so I didn't listen to that advice. I went and actually thought I had one more corporate gig in me. And I think this is a lot about the lack of confidence in self, right? I'm going to jump from the corporate world into being an entrepreneur, which I'd never done before. I lasted 9 months, Emmanuel, and then I realized this was not going to be for me. And then I went and set up Compass with 2 other business partners, which was, one of the best things professionally I've ever done in my life. It's so rewarding and fulfilling. But I can't tell you how many, and you talk about this, the way, the ocean, the ups and downs, of life. I used to wake up every morning at 4 o'clock and go for a walk along the beach in Jumeirah Beach here in Dubai, and be wondering, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to put myself into a situation where there is some stability for my family? And after a few months of this, I started realizing that I was focusing on the wrong things. I was focusing on outcomes and not the process, right? And so as soon as I shifted from the stress and the pressure of the outcome to falling in love with the process of my day-to-day interacting with my coachees, helping to grow the business, focusing on my clients and my relationships with my founders, things started to change. And the byproduct of that, falling in love with the process, was all the other things that I was looking for. And I think that for me was a massive lesson for myself, that simply by shifting focus, you start to look at the things that are in your control. And the things in your control are the things that we should be spending time on. And I think that was super important for me, and it relieved me a lot of that.
Wow. You've gone through a lot there, and I can just see light bulbs switching on,
Yeah.
popping left, right, and center. And there's so much. I'm sure people listening are having an epiphany with those bulbs. And you started off with talking about a common problem, immigration, but quite common in the UAE, Abu Dhabi, and Dubai, where you move to a new country thinking it's El Dorado, and you get there and you realize I've made a mistake. This is not what I expected. And I smile because when I moved to the first hospital I worked in here, it was a similar thing. I went there expecting to work in a big department, and then I went there and realized the department was me.
Wow.
There was nobody else, and and nothing was set up, so I had to set up everything. So many times I had the white flag in my hand, ready to put it up, and I said, "I'll keep going." Now it's the biggest infectious disease department in the UAE, and probably I'm not boasting. I'm sure people would say it's probably the best infectious disease department in the UAE, with a big team, great people working with in 5 years. And there will be many people that have been in that situation that you just described, when you think I've made the wrong decision. And I really like the way you realize it really early. Often people don't; they keep going, and then you decided to pivot. And I was also interested by the fact that you pivoted to another job, and